Hello, everybody. Welcome to History 485, History in the Wild, more specifically on science, technology, and progress in museums. My name is Dr. Vale. You can call me Dr. Vale or you can call me Professor Vale, and I am your professor for the class, this session B course. So a little bit about myself. I received my doctorate from ASU in American history and public history specifically. Public history, which is one of the fields that we are going to be covering throughout the course of the next 7.5 weeks, right? The idea of applied history, doing history outside of the academic arena and in the public arena. This particular topic is very close to my heart. It's very closely tied to my own research, which is the ways in which ideas of progress are displayed in museum arenas, which is what we are covering throughout this course. In this class, we are going to be doing a few different things, right? We are going to be covering some of the theory behind the construction and evolution of museums, the ways in which things are displayed in this particular exhibitionary space. But the other component of this course is, of course, to also give you some skills to develop ways of working outside of an academic arena, introducing you to the type of work that you could do as a historian in the public. And so these are the two major sort of pieces of this class. If we're looking at the layout of the course, I do have a grader this semester. I will post their information in the announcement for this video. The grader will essentially be working on some of the assignments, all of the, really the final project-based assignments, and then also a decent number of the discussion board posts. But any questions that you have, you can refer either to him or to me, and we will solve any issues that you may have throughout the semester. So aside from myself and my grader, right, we are the only people that are essentially running this course, I want to talk a little bit more about what the class is going to entail. So firstly, we are splitting the class into 3 modules. If you look at the syllabus, we have basically the evolution of understanding and working in museums throughout these 3 modules. So first, we are identifying what museums are and the role that they play in the public. Our second module is about interpreting the things that are in museums and how museums present material. And then our last module is getting you to the end point of the course, which is what your final project will be about, and that is exhibiting things in a museum environment. So if you look at the general layout of how we will get to this point, the assignments are split in 2 ways. There are assignments that are geared towards showing that you have knowledge of the material that we're covering. That's primarily what we'll be doing in discussion board posts and our second major assignment in the class, as well as your museum exhibit review assignment. And then most of the other assignments in the course are tied to your final project, which is creating a museum exhibit of your own, a hypothetical museum exhibit for an institution that would display this exhibit for you. So what we are doing anytime we do this sort of course that is a public history minded class is we are going to undertake the work that public historians do, which if you are someone with history knowledge working in a public arena, you are marrying your theoretical knowledge, right, all of the content knowledge that you bring from the major that you've acquired, with the work that you'll do in the public, right? So a public historian is essentially bridging theoretical knowledge with public practice. So this is essentially how we will go through this semester. We will look at how this type of work is done and the things that we need to be aware of when we are working outside of a teaching, academic, educational focused arena. So if you look at how the readings are laid out in the modules, you don't need to purchase any books. If you like to read hard copy, you can purchase Alexander and Alexander's Museums in Motion. All of the texts that we're using are from the second edition. The third edition just came out. If you prefer to buy the third edition, you can, but everything will be geared towards the second edition of the text. And the second edition is probably cheaper. So I would advise getting the second edition. But if you want to buy that, you can. Otherwise, everything else is available either through Canvas, through PDF, or there are a couple things that we will be looking at from the textbook Companion to Museum Studies that are available as free ebook chapters through the ASU library. So you don't have to purchase any of the text if you don't want to. In this first week, what I would like you to do is familiarize yourself with Canvas. Probably most of you have used Canvas by this point. So introduce yourself on the discussion board. That's the only assignment that you need to do in this first week. The discussion board will be split up into small groups instead of having everybody in the class talk in one large discussion group. So you'll get a chance to know a small number of other people in the course throughout the semester. You get to know each other a little bit better. If your discussion group gets to a point where other people are not really responding, because I know people drop throughout the semester and this can happen, then just email me and we will merge some groups together to ensure that you have somebody to talk to. From that point onwards, you are going to have a pretty similar layout for the following weeks of the course. So basically week 2 till the end of the class. You will have 3 things that you'll have to do a week. You'll have to do your initial post, which is due at the middle of the week, right, where you show that you are reading the text, engaging with the text that you are assigned to read for that week, and the questions that are assigned with that. By the end of that week, which is that Sunday, you will have to respond to somebody else in your group. You don't have to do citations in these discussion board posts, but you do have to show that you're engaging with the text. So anytime you want to use direct quotes or just reference, in, Alexander and Alexander, I got a sense that A, B, and C things were happening. A lot of the discussion board posts will ask you to directly address certain chapters or certain readings. So it's a good idea to go look at what those questions are before you even start reading the chapters that are assigned to you. So those 2 things are due pretty much every week, starting really in week 1 when you introduce yourself. And then we also have an assignment that's due each week. So on that Sunday, right, you want to make sure that you're doing all the things that you need to do to complete the assignments. Like I said, most of them are geared towards the final project, so that you are getting regular feedback from me on what you need to be doing, so you don't turn in something at the end of the semester that you're not really sure is what I'm looking for. So I'm giving you a lot of points in the semester in which I will look at the work that you're doing and tell you if you're going in the right direction, give you some guidance as we go. When you work on these assignments, the thing that I want to emphasize now and throughout the rest of this Session B class is you are doing in this assignment essentially what public historians do, which is merging your knowledge of content with public practice. The public practice side of it is basically what our readings are about all semester, right? They're about how we understand museums, how we do interpretation in the museum, and how we do exhibition in the museum. So anything that is centered on the museum and how to do display is going to come from the course material. Don't do any outside research to answer the questions that are tied to museum-centric things. But the final project is going to ask you to do a hypothetical exhibit on a topic. So when you choose a topic, you do have to do your own outside research on the topic of your choosing. The topic choice is going to be very broad. So people have asked me this in the past in this class. You can use topics that you have researched in other classes or have done something similar to in another class, because what I am interested in is how you take these ideas and apply them to a museum environment. It's also a really, really broad assignment. So here in week 2, this is the first thing you're going to do is give me your proposal of what it is that you're interested in doing for your exhibit. But anything that is tied to science and technology is essentially what you can do. And in some of the future lectures that are coming up here in Canvas, I go into more depth on what that can look like. So another thing that I want to also emphasize here when you look at the syllabus, and something to take note of, is that not all the assignments are weighted the same. There are some things that are worth a lot more, like the final version of the project, whereas something like a peer review is not worth as much. So prioritize your time and your efforts, right, to ensure that you're doing the work that you need to do to be successful in the class. When we get to the final project, you won't actually have to record yourself doing, a presentation, because the way that this is going to work is it's like you're presenting an idea for an exhibit to a museum to use in the future. What you'll do instead is you'll submit 2 documents. Simultaneously, you'll do a visual PowerPoint, so I get a sense of how you want things to be laid out, and then you will have your written sort of script for how you would do this if we were meeting face to face. But we, again, will cover more of that as we go through the semester. In terms of how things will be laid out on Canvas, everything is organized into the modules. So I'm giving you a decent amount of freedom in terms of when you want to complete things within the course. Basically, everything will open up by module. So module 1, which is weeks 1 through 3, all of that is available now. And then as we close out the module, towards the end of the module, I will open up module 2. And then, once we're finishing module 2, I'll open up module 3. You are essentially tied to, within weeks, you can get about a week ahead in terms of discussion board posts, I believe. So it's not set up in a way that you can complete the whole class within the first 2 weeks, but you do have quite a bit of flexibility, especially in terms of the readings, so you know what you need to read before, we get there, if you're somebody who needs to read things all at once because of your personal schedule. So in terms of, how this is going to work going forward, in terms of grades and things that I'm expecting, like I mentioned before, because we are marrying this, theory about museums and the content that we know as historians with practice in the museum. One thing I want to emphasize now, will remind you of this throughout the semester, is people get wrapped up in the content sometimes. You always want to, go back to the things that we're covering in class, make sure that you're citing things that we are covering in the classroom for the reasoning behind how you do your exhibition. But again, we will make sure that we're doing that as we go through the semester, and I'll give you feedback on that if I see any issues with it. I am going to try to get grades back to you within a week. Ideally shorter than that. I will tell you that I'm teaching quite a few classes this semester, so I will try to the best of my ability, especially to give you things with enough time for you to work on the next assignment that is geared towards the final project. And I will keep you up to date if anything goes awry with that I definitely will not expect you to do things in really short time frames. So expect grades back within the week, especially on assignments that are final project orientated, a lot of constructive commentary. So this is an online class, so the ways in which we will meet will be primarily through email or through Canvas. If you live here in the Phoenix area, then I can meet with you in person. I am on the Tempe campus Monday, Wednesday, Friday in the mornings, I teach an on-ground class from 9:40 to 10:30. So if you are able to meet, around 10:30 to about 11:30 on those days, we can schedule something like that if you feel like you need to meet. We can also schedule things like Skype or phone calls if sometimes it's easier just to talk things out, in person or over the phone versus going back and forth in email. So that's fine if we need to do that. Lastly, I do want to mention before I end this video, because this is an upper division history major class, there are a couple things that we want to make sure that we're doing for these assignments. First, everyone should be using the same citation style, and that is Chicago Turabian style, footnote style citations. If you are someone who has not done that before, then the first couple assignments are a good way for you to receive feedback in terms of how this should work, but this is the standard citation style for history majors, so you want to make sure you're using that style. There are quite a few free guides available to you online to do this type of citation. So I try to hold back on sending me citation questions and just try to the best of your ability do things in this footnote style, and if I see a big problem with it, I will let you know. The other thing that I want to emphasize here is that because so many of these assignments are written assignments, just like we do in history classes, you do want to make sure that you are not plagiarizing assignments. For this particular class, this is true, especially when we're talking about you choosing an exhibit. Don't just try to submit something that somebody else has already done at a museum. It's fine to use guides from other types of exhibits that exist out there, but if you're just copying what somebody else is doing already, then you're not really doing the process of what we have to do in a classroom environment, and that is going to be, for the purposes of this class, right, plagiarism, right, because you are not using your own ideas to create this sort of final project. So all the regular issues with plagiarism also apply, right? It's better to not turn in your best work or turn in your work late than it is to plagiarize. And when you're in doubt, you should always cite. So please make sure that you don't plagiarize. It can be very detrimental to your academic career. So I think that is pretty much all that I wanted to say. I have all of the other standards for the course available to you in the syllabus. If you have any questions about that, then feel free to email me, but I don't want to go on and on in the video about it. So with that, I will let you go. It is a pleasure to start this course with you. Looking forward to this semester and getting to know all of you through the things that you submit to me, and I'm always really excited to look at all the projects that people come up with for this class. So I will see you in the discussion board.